Hello, I'm gonna talk with you guys today about creating calming sensory spaces in the classroom. Um, I put this presentation together because the school that I work for asked me to put it together for them, and then I wanted to adapt it so that it could be used as a starting place for other occupational therapists, for professionals who aren't OTs to go to their school and say, hey, like these are some resources that we can use to build safe places in our classrooms for our kids to be able to access. Um, the school that I work in has a dedicated therapy room, which serves a number of different purposes. There are PTs who work in there with me, who work with their kids on building gross motor skills. The OTs work on OT related goals like building core strength and arm strength to support fine motor skills. We work directly with the different special education programs. There's a special education preschool, and the LI mild to moderate and moderate to severe classes all work with us and have access to this room, and especially work on sensory co-regulation and building sensory self-reg strategies with an OT. But there are some drawbacks to just having a designated therapy room space in the building, because there are limitations to what we're able to offer. There are only so many therapist staff members to go around. The priority then obviously goes to kids who have IEPs. Um, and also, the therapy room was never intended to be a tier one support, reaching everybody in the school, but rather tier two, reaching everybody in the special education classes, and tier three, reaching specifically the kids who have OT or PT on their IEPs. And then another drawback of it is that a lot of there's some mistaken assumptions about what it's supposed to be used for, and some other professionals were suggesting using the therapy room, or were trying to use the therapy room as a place for children who were actively melting down, escalating, or in crisis. And there's equipment in there that it just really wasn't safe. It wasn't made to be a place for a child who is out of control of their own body. It was made to be a place for a child working collaboratively to master control of their own body, with a therapist or teacher working alongside them. And so, taking a step back from what the therapy room has to offer at a school setting, we can look at what kinds of similar interventions, to reach more of the kind of the general part of the scope of those goals, what we can bring into the classroom, so that students aren't having to be pulled out to access those kinds of um, benefits. And when we talk about building a calming sensory space in the classroom, there's a couple of different facets of what we're talking about there. We're talking about, on this slide, specifically, what is the sensory space part of it. It is bringing the goal of the therapy room to build sensory self-regulation strategies into the realm of accessible to everybody rather than only the students who can use the therapy room. We want to make a space for kids to have room to listen to their own bodies, and often kids inherently have a sense of how to do that. And often, kids listening to their own bodies gets labeled by adults as behavior if it's in an inconvenient way or an unexpected way. And so, we want to try, rather than to shut down what we're calling behavior, or get in the way of kids listening to their bodies, tell them to stop listening to their bodies. We don't want to do any of that. We want to instead channel it into kind of an appropriate, or class appropriate, or safe, or mitigating whatever it is that the difficulty is, but rather than shutting it down. And then when we're talking about the calming facet of this, we might be again talking about two different things. Some people think of a child needing to get to a calmer energy state when they are talking about a child who is in distress, or sad, or crying, or upset, or stressed, or anxious. And so for that, you kind of need a space that is focused on resettling the nervous system after upset, or preemptively regulating before getting to the point of becoming upset. And then some people, when they talk about getting to a calmer energy state, they are thinking of meeting children's needs for movement, when that need is greater than what the school day allows for. We know that children learn best when they can move. We know that humans learn best when they can move. I say, well, I'm wiggling my chair back and forth and jiggling my leg as I record this presentation. And finding ways to incorporate that kind of movement into the class can help children reach an energy state where they are focused and able to learn, which is also sometimes what people refer to when they refer to calm or calming. So looking at the first kind of grouping of those two things, looking at resettling, soothing, securing, there are kind of three facets that I included in this, and these aren't meant to be completely comprehensive for every space and every situation, because this presentation, when it was originally written, was for a school that is pre-K through third grade. And then it was expanded to go to a school that is pre-K through fifth grade. And I think that it could expand beyond fifth grade as well. But at the same time, obviously, the scope of a kindergarten classroom or a reception classroom or a whatever is the earliest of elementary or primary school is going to, the needs of that classroom are going to be different than those of a child in third grade or grade 3 or grade 5 or middle school or secondary school. They're going to need different things, and so that's where it takes some creativity on the part of the teacher in kind of interpreting the general principles and figuring out how to apply those to the more specific situation. But these are to give kind of a foundation or a baseline for that. So again, when we're talking about a resettling, soothing, securing area, then we talk about having somewhere to retreat, something to fidget with, and something to think about. I'm going to come back to those in just a second. I'm going to first show my second type of calming area, which is for moving, wiggling, and fidgeting. And in that, I again came up with kind of 3 subcategories or principles that you could incorporate. Somewhere to move, something to lift, push, or carry, and some way to balance, wobble, or spin. And I'm going to explain why those are the ones that I chose kind of with the most like bang for their buck, if that's what you... that's kind of a way of framing it. But again, I'll come back to these in just a second. So talking about resettling area with somewhere to retreat. So it helps, obviously you need, to apply classroom safety. And again, this is an area where the age of the classroom really makes a big difference to it. But the more that it can feel like somewhere that is secluded and safe, even if it isn't literally secluded or literally out of line of sight of the teacher, if it can feel like it is, or if it can feel like it's out of the way of peers staring at them, those are just kind of some considerations to incorporate in making a calming, resettling area feel like it is a safe place to retreat and to recuperate. And so that might be the corner of the room, that might be inside a tent or under something like a table or countertop. It might be behind something like a cabinet or a low bookshelf. And then I think of kind of just putting some kind of comfortable or inviting seating. It could be a cushion on the floor, it could be a beanbag, it could be a chair that just like has a little homey pillow on it, or a stuffed animal. Something that makes it feel like somewhere like warm and inviting, as opposed to I have to go sit in the chair in the corner. When I Google like sensory spaces for classrooms, I see a lot that I think are well-meaning with like posters and emotions and things like that. And I do think some aspect of that element can be helpful, but I think that it can also become visually overwhelming very fast. To like go sit in a chair next to a poster of, 50 emotion faces all staring at you and be expected maybe even to like try and choose your emotion from that or whatever. I would lean more towards having very minimal excess things in that area that aren't the literal tools that are being used every time. You might have noise canceling headphones or some way to kind of reduce or muffle the noise a little bit. If you are incorporating some kind of a timer on this in your classroom, depending on how you manage your classroom, If it's, I could see this either way. I could see teachers saying you can use the space for as long as you need it, and or you can use the space until a teacher or aide can get over there and kind of co-regulate with you and talk about what's going on. I could also see saying you use the space for the length of this visual timer, and then try to come back to your seat, or try to inform a teacher that you need more help with regrouping. And if that's the case, then like a glitter timer or like a visual one can be really helpful. I would choose something that doesn't beep or make noise, both for the sake of not disrupting the rest of the class and for the sake of not unsettling the nervous system that just managed to get resettled. A really key element of this for me is that anybody is allowed to use the space appropriately without being questioned or in trouble. Of course, appropriately is a key word there, but I wouldn't make students, as much as you can, I mean, there might be an age for which this doesn't apply, but I wouldn't make students have to ask permission to go regroup or go take a break for a minute. As much as you possibly can, I would just let them use it and then address inappropriate usage if it starts becoming a problem, rather than try to like lock it down from the beginning at the risk of making kids feel like it's not safe for them to go there. And then my second kind of facet of resettling area is having something to fidget with. Now, of course, I'm sure everybody has heard of fidget tools, or some people call them fidget toys. I'm sure if your area is anything like my area, that kids are currently in kind of a pop-it craze, and before that it was fidget spinners, and there's all kinds of fidget tools that are like marketed and that you could use. I say this while, again, not only am I rocking my chair back and forth, but I have a fidget ring on my hand that I'm fidgeting with while I give this presentation. Fidget tools are great. Especially when there is some kind of instruction involved, and so it is understood that they're tools, both by the adults and by the child. At the same time, I don't like the commercialization of sensory processing and sensory functioning that has kind of sprung out of the conversation globally about what this looks like and what we can do better for our kids. So at the same point, I'm not going to say you have to buy fidget tools to be able to have them in your sensory corner in order to, help your classroom go well or whatever. You can make, well, first of all, everyone who's ever hung out with a kid for 5 minutes knows that kids can fidget with anything. But there are some other options like that don't require you to buy things. If you have a little pillow or a rug or anything with like tassels on it, or anything that's just like fidgety and soft and encourages you to, those little sequin pillows, anything that you are kind of drawn to rubbing your hands over is going to help the body ground itself. And these are also like strategies that we can teach kids explicitly, especially as they get older. Like, hey, doing things with your 5 senses. Some people have heard of like name one thing you can touch, one thing you can smell, one thing you can hear. Those are mindfulness things that bring our mind back to where we are and kind of help us regulate in our distress. And explicitly teaching them can be helpful, but especially with younger kids and also with all people, the more you can support those interventions by not necessarily needing to explicitly teach them, but rather by just like making the space so inviting that that's what you're drawn to doing inherently, it makes it easier for people to access those strategies than if they have to access their higher thinking and remember, oh yeah, I remember 10 weeks ago when my teacher lectured about how to use the sensory space and I'm supposed to think of one thing I can touch, one thing I can hear. Well, okay, you could hope that they can access that higher thinking in a time when they're feeling dysregulated, or you can just put a sequin pillow there and it's like so inviting to touch that they can't help but touch it and hear it going like swishy swishy as they're touching it. And there you go, you've got a mindfulness activity built right in that no one had to do any explicit instruction about. So I really like it whenever we can come up with those strategies that just kind of support they support their own self. They don't even need explicit instruction. Another couple of options of things to fidget with. I've got visual motor on here because that's one that we love in OT. using blocks or anything that can be set into a pattern. That could be those little tangram math manipulatives. That could be a puzzle. And the student looking at a model and then copying it. It's not supposed to be hard. It's not supposed to be a challenging puzzle or a thing that is out of the kid's current reach where it's easy. This is supposed to be like just enough for your brain to lift itself up out of being in distress mode and instead find an easy challenge to conquer. Like, I like when I'm stressed out, I like to play Tetris on my phone or a little game called Two Dots where you're just making squares out of dots that are the same color as each other. Those are not hard. I don't have to think hard about what a square is or where a block shaped like another block fits against it. I'm doing those things because they like access the like simple problem solving portions of my brain. And that helps a dysregulated brain settle itself back down. So that's kind of the thinking behind something visual motor like that. It's not supposed to be a challenge. And then my third option for things to fidget with was creative expression. So you might put coloring sheets, or you might put a little journal prompt like, what am I thinking right now? What am I feeling? There are pros and cons to that. Especially, I find in OT practice, there are pros and cons to that because most of the children on my caseload feel very threatened by writing or drawing, and so if writing is the thing that they hate and are stressed by and are crying over at their desk, then obviously they're not going to take advantage of, I can get up and go sit for a minute in the resettling corner and help myself calm down and write a journal prompt. Like, that's going to feel like increased stressor, or even color a coloring sheet maybe. But at the same time, it can also on the flip side, provide a awareness of like what it is that people use writing and drawing for in a way that feels personally beneficial and in a way that feels calming. It can be a good tool for lots of people. Drawing your feelings, or scribbling your feelings, or writing about your feelings are all really good coping strategies that people have. So that might be a good option to keep there with crayons or colored pencils or something that can't be used inappropriately very easily. And then the last thing that I had was something to think about. So I had visual distracting, visual settling, and breathing strategies. And so you could have an I Spy type of thing. It doesn't have to be like the branded I Spy things. It could just be like a busy picture or a cluttered drawer, and then it's like, can you find this, this, and this in the picture or in the drawer with physical, tangible objects? Because again, it's like the visual motor one, where it's like, it's just like a mildly distracting, mildly challenging, but well within the solvable range problem for your brain to think about. And then for visual settling, that's another area where having that visual timer, like a bubble timer or a glitter timer, can come in handy. So it's like, shake this up and watch the glitter settle. Everybody, I feel like, has heard of that one. That's a real buzzwordy sensory thing, but it is because it's a cool one. And then when it comes to breathing strategies, some classes are already kind of incorporating this into their teaching, or are encouraging kids to kind of, do mindfulness activities or things like that. One thing that I really like with kids is for it to be tangible in some way. And the easiest way that I found is to have something that moves when you blow on it, like streamers, like I have here in this picture, or a feather or a pinwheel. And then it kind of, it reinforces itself. It is self-reinforcing in the sense of, I can tell whether or not I'm taking a deep breath, because when I take a deep breath in and I blow out, then these streamers move. I don't have to do it according to some, higher learning lecture that I'm supposed to be accessing right now when I'm stressed out. I can just blow and watch this, this feather blow in the wind. I also like inhale to lift a stuffed animal or pillow, but that requires there to be enough space to lie down. And I know that can be challenging in the classroom. And so that one's kind of your mileage may vary on whether or not that works for you or not. So switching gears and moving to the move, wiggle, fidget side of this presentation. the kind of three general facets that I had come up with are somewhere to move, something to lift, push, or carry, and some way to balance, wobble, or spin. And I know some of these sound like, how am I going to do that in a classroom? I understand that. Somewhere to move. I had looked at three kind of different ways that this can be incorporated in because, of course, there is the concept of, yes, you can make a physical space in your classroom where kids can go to, just like a resettling corner, or it can be both. It can be a movement corner and a resettling corner. If you do that, I like marking it off with tape because then that becomes okay, well, you can walk laps around the tape and there you go, there's a movement and it's built right into the boundary. So every part of the corner itself is useful and like maximized the most that you can get out of what is usually a small space. If you're thinking about movement at your desk, then flexible seating is what everybody talks about these days. It can be as complicated as specialized chairs and wobble stools and things like that that some schools are able to purchase. It can also be as simple as a rubber band around the legs of the desk to kick against, a rubber band around the legs of the chair to kick against. Fidget tools that children can keep at their desk, and or having something placed under the desk like a something that's a box or a step or a stack of books that you can put your feet up onto and down off of and up onto and down off of. I mean, we work with what we've got, and I have worked in schools that have huge budgets, and I've worked in schools that have no budgets, so I truly understand the limitations of both sides of those things. And then the third kind of way that I see classes incorporating movement that I love is doing it instead of just sitting at the desk. So I've seen classes where even, third and fifth and sixth and eighth grade classes where they have a low table on the floor. The students can sit on the floor at the desk. They don't care if students lay on the floor with their book in front of them to complete work or with their computer in front of them, like lying and prone and propped up on elbows. I love that for core strengthening. Or doing small group work and you move around the room to interact with different parts of the lesson. Like over here, you're going to read this and then answer these questions, and over there, you're going to read the next part. I have seen lots of different ways that this can be creatively implemented. Going outside to do science or writing. I love it when movement can be part of the lesson instead of sitting at the desk. So now I get into what would be the kind of the two realms of sensory processing where you're going to get the most impact from the smallest amount of sensory activity is going to be in the realms of proprioceptive sensation, which is like lifting, pushing, carrying the things with deep muscle sensation. Proprioception is what lets you know if you're like receiving a tight, squeezy hug. It's what lets you know that your muscles are getting tired when you carry heavy things. And then the other one is vestibular, which is balance, wobble, spin. But I'll get to that in just a second. So lifting, pushing, carrying are going to meet that proprioceptive sensation craving, and that kind of doing a proprioceptive activity is very, very regulating. With the smallest amount of activity, it's the most regulating for kids' bodies. And so that's why I have that as like a specific slide here. Of course, it's hard to be like, how do I push things in the classroom? How do I carry things and lift things in the classroom? Anytime that you have, like we put up the chairs for the cleaning crew at the end of the day, or we need to move desks around. You can incorporate this with movement. I love it when teachers are like, if they have desks that are like laid out in like a grid system, a little spaced apart from each other. And then they're like, okay, well, we have to, like, we're going to do this small group work, and these 4 students will be together, and these 4, and these 4, and these 4. So everybody, please pick your desk up and move to, like, this quadrant or this side of the room. Then it gets some movement. It gets, like, a little brain break. It gives a little challenge that's very solvable. How do I pick this desk up and move it over there in a semi-orderly, semi-chaotic fashion with all of my little 10-year-old friends? And it gives heavy work. It gives lifting, pushing, carrying work to their bodies. And then when they sit back down, and get past the giggles and the talking with their friends, then their bodies are more regulated and more ready to learn what thing it was that they were just moving over there to learn. I have seen some teachers have success with carrying things between their classroom and another class, or their classroom and the office. Some teachers, I love it when this can be meaningful, like, hey, we need hand sanitizer, or hey, we need printer paper from the office. Can you go pick some up? But I also understand when it can't really be inherently meaningful. And I have seen some success with classrooms coming to an agreement with one another. Like, hey, Mrs. A in the third grade classroom and Mrs. B in the second grade classroom have an agreement that when one of their kids is too wiggly, they're going to be like, oh, hey, student, Mrs. B said that she needed the stuff that's in this backpack, and then the backpack's just got like 4 like random textbooks in it, and it's like, hey, can you take this down to her classroom and then come right back, please? And then the Mrs. B knows that a student coming in, and then they hang the backpack up on the wall, and then they go back to their classroom. And then when Mrs. B is like, hey, a student in my classroom is being too wiggly, I need you to carry this down. Mrs. A needed me to return these books. So it's just kind of like a built-in, and it makes the student feel like they have rapport with the teacher if it's not being delivered in a punitive way, but rather like a, hey, can you run an errand for me? I know I can count on you to run this errand for me, type of way. And then a lot of the bullet points that I have on this slide reference kind of having more organized like exercises or activities that are a part of the movement corner. I can see either like putting words or pictures on popsicle sticks or cards, like a deck of cards, and having those accessible to the student to like grab a popsicle stick out of the jar or grab a card out of the stack and decide what activity it is that they can do. And then those can give you a little bit more room to be like, look, this is wall push-ups. This is chair push-ups. These are some weights that you can lift, like 1 pound or 2 pound weights, or weights that are just like a water bottle. Hold it like this and then move your arm like this and do some, do some weightlifting. Pick these things up and put them over here. And those give you the chance to kind of be guiding the student in what would be helpful to getting their body the movement that it needs, without you having to stop instruction time to go over and physically tell the student that. Once they know, oh, okay, I can draw a popsicle stick from the jar and do that. And when I go to the movement corner, I can do, 3 movements from the popsicle stick jar, and then I need to return to my seat. Then it just like kind of becomes a system that's incorporated into your classroom. So then it's the same with vestibular activities, balance, wobble, and spin. Vestibular refers to your inner ear, kind of your sense of balance sensation. So it's as simple as having a popsicle stick activity that says balance on 1 foot for 10 seconds, or popsicle stick activities that show the downward dog yoga pose, because inverting your head is a really, really powerful wobble and balance, vestibular sensation, sensory activity. And inverting your head is obviously a difficult thing to accomplish safely in a school setting. We don't want kids doing flips, but putting your hands and legs kind of in quadruped and letting your head hang down is a safe way to do that. One that I really love for spinning is having an office chair accessible, and that could be your comfy chair in your corner of the room. And then, like I said, I sit in my office chair in my office and wiggle back and forth. And as long as students aren't, like spinning wildly and chaotically or rolling it around the room. But again, I think that inappropriate use needs to be dealt with when it comes up, and not just like kind of stopping yourself before you even get started with, well, what if they use this wrong? Well, what if they use this wrong? Never mind, I just won't put any of it up. A rocking chair could also be a good option for a resettle corner. Having my office chair both spins and also rocks, and so I can sit and rock in it when I need some extra vestibular regulation while I'm sitting at my desk. And so these are just some different ways that you can incorporate proprioceptive and vestibular activities into your classroom safely. But there are a lot more out there if you Google proprioceptive classroom activities or vestibular classroom activities. I couldn't put everybody's every idea on one slide. And if you have an occupational therapist at your at your school or at your district, or if you think that you ought to, but you don't know one. There might be one. I know when I worked in the States, then I was spread so thin that if a teacher had just wanted to talk to me or collaborate with me, I wouldn't have even known that I was being contacted unless they had talked to one of the people who talked with me directly on the regular. And I know that there are lots of parts of the U.S. that are struggling like that right now, where there's just like not enough providers to go around. But you might be able to reach out to whoever it is who works for your district or for your school or for your cluster of schools, and collaborate with them. See if they have any ideas that have to do with your specific situation. If you have some question about something that I said here or something that pertains to your unique situation, you can also leave a comment. I might be able to answer directly. I can't promise that I will because I get a lot of comments. But I can do my best. And I just want to reiterate how much I appreciate your work with kids every day. It's sometimes a thankless job, maybe often a thankless job, and it's been extra challenging these past few years. And I am right there alongside you. We're just going to do everything that we can to keep making a system that is too often based on how to achieve outcomes that look good on paper, and together we'll keep working on making it actually match up to what the way that children are. Children aren't extremely simple. Children don't always look logical on paper. But the way that they learn and figuring it out and figuring out what we can do to make schools more accessible and more diverse and more inclusive is always worth it. So thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next time.